Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jami Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit, and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Grandma Has ADHD. I always open with I'm excited, but I'm like doubly, triply excited to welcome today's guest because he is somebody that I respect tremendously, and you're going to learn why in this podcast. But he is the grandfather of ADHD coaching, I would say. He is the pioneer. So I'm going to read you a little bit about his intro, and then we're going to get right into it. So today's guest is David Giwerc, a pioneer in ADHD coaching and founder of the ADD Coach Academy, the first and largest ADHD coach training program accredited by both the International Coach Federation and the Professional Association of ADHD Coaches. As a master certified coach, David has transformed the lives of ADHD entrepreneurs, executives, and CEOs through his internationally recognized coaching practice. His leadership extends beyond his coaching work. He was instrumental in establishing National ADHD Awareness Day through a U.S. Senate resolution and authored Permission to Proceed, sharing his unique coaching models for adults with ADHD. David's groundbreaking research on character strengths in adults with ADHD has earned prestigious recognition, making him one of the most respected voices in understanding and empowering those with ADHD. And before I even bring him on, I want to share a little bit about my experience with David Giwerc. I met him at the ADHD International Conference in November of 2024 when we sat near each other in a presentation. I did not know who he was. I just figured he was over the age of 50, and I was going to let him know that I was, sorry about that, David, starting the Grandma Has ADHD podcast. I did not know at the time that he had actually started ADDCA, which is the program that I am currently enrolled in to earn my personal ADHD coaching certification. And David not only invited me to attend a group of the coaches so that I could meet them, but gave me his direct email and said that he wanted to help me because he really believed in what I was doing, and also helped me prepare for a presentation that I'm hoping will be approved for the International ADHD Conference. But I'm just so truly excited and honored to have you here. And there's so many ways I want to take this conversation, but welcome to the podcast, David Giwerc.
Thank you. What a beautiful introduction. Talk about coming from the heart. And I forgot about all those things we did together because they happen so quickly and they happen such in depth. We have fun when we're talking. And that's what makes the profession we're in so wonderful. So I'm glad to be here. I think what you're doing is outstanding. I don't think anybody else is doing it. And I love it because now I'm a grandpa. Grandkids call me Papa. So I can understand where ADHD goes, not only because I've seen the progression from the middle age, from the 30s up to now, but now as a person and a grandparent with ADHD, I can really look at it from that lens.
Right. I'm really excited to have you on, both because you are a person over 50 with ADHD and you really are a pioneer in the space. And one of the things that I have loved about the ADHD discovery is how innovative we are. And it just turns out that you innovated in the space of ADHD. And I am benefiting personally from your curriculum. And to your point, when you said something in the beginning that you had forgotten, all of these connections, we with ADHD tend to go from thing to thing to thing and we don't savor the moment that we're in. And I heard actually in your coaching program, someone say that they had to go back to LinkedIn to recall what it is that they had accomplished, because we tend to just go, go, go and accomplish. And we can talk about that as well. And I'm going to, if you have more than the 30 minutes I allot, I think your
Absolutely.
wisdom is well worth it. So I want to start with you like I do with everybody, and that is your ADHD journey. How did you get diagnosed? Because, you may have been diagnosed younger, but a lot of my guests haven't been. And I'm going to apologize to anybody who's hearing a little bit of an entitled growl. That is my dog, Benji, who I have treats next to me to keep him quiet, and he is insisting on more. So I'll be dealing with the repercussions of that later. But back to my original question, David, your ADHD journey.
Who says we can't stay on task? Look how beautifully you did that. You transitioned from thing to thing. So my diagnosis happened in the mid 90s. And at that time, very little was known about ADHD. There were not a lot of options for treatment and medication. There were not a lot of people to diagnose and to treat. So I literally read Nat Hollowell's book during the distraction. And when I read that book, there was an epiphany, because I understood the paradox of ADHD. How could I be so good in some things in my life? And how could I be terrible at other things? There was no in between. It was just this huge paradox between strength and weakness. And then I read the book. And at that time, I also read a piece of research by a very well-known researcher. It's on Dr. Zametkin with a Z, Zametkin. Later, there was a subsequent research study that came after that by Nora Volkow, who was the director of National Institute on Drug Addiction. And the first one, Zametkin said that people with ADHD, when they're bored or uninterested, neurologically have a very hard time activating their brains. He showed scans of people that were engaged and interested, and the ADHD brain just like a neurotypical brain. But when those same people who didn't have ADHD, were asked to pay attention to boring, mundane tasks, they still had the neurological ability to pay attention and stay focused. And then, of course, the people that had ADHD, just the opposite. Their brains, and the more pressure you put on them to pay attention to things that are boring or that mandatory and pressure to that, the more their brains shut down. And then in 2009, 2011, Nora Volkow followed up with a 9-year study. And what she said in that study, basically, and I was already diagnosed before that, but I'm just telling you that as part of the diagnosis, I went on an exploration journey to find out what is ADHD, because nobody was explaining it. And so I finally, when that research came out in 2011, it validated a lot of what I had been working in training and coaching, that ADHD is a deficit of interest. And out of that, I created all kinds of visual models, because metaphor helped people with ADHD understand things that are invisible and make it more visible. But I was already in my 40s when that happened. But in my 30s, what I did is I went out and tried to get diagnosed. And when I went to certain places, they actually told me I couldn't have ADHD because I was an adult. At that time, the prevailing model and lens for diagnosis was it was only in children and teenagers and could not be in adults. Finally, in the local market I lived in Albany, New York, there was the head of the psychiatry department at Albany Medical School. And I went to him because I couldn't find anybody to diagnose me at the time. I probably was the first person in a population of, let's say, 750,000 people that took Ritalin and it didn't work, but then took Adderall and it did. And what I realized is that for the first time in my life, I can actually pause and pay attention to what I was paying attention to, challenge it, because my thoughts were so fast and quick that the dextroamphetamine slowed down the brain so I could pause and actually ask myself, what am I paying attention to there? How's it serving me? What's it doing for me? Do I have the ability to change these things? And that was huge, because I didn't even know I had a pause button. I didn't even know what inhibition was. So I was 36 years of age at that time. I was working for an ad agency doing very, very well, except what they didn't realize, the things that I did great, I was great at. The things that I didn't, I worked my tail off. Like account reports, anything with numbers were brutal for me. So about 11 years into that, after going to 2 or 3 ad agencies in New York City, very competitive business, I started to realize that this thing called ADHD had been very much a part of my life. And I read an article in Newsweek magazine about coaching. Thomas Letter, who founded Coach University, was going around the country in a Winnebago introducing people to coaching. So I called him up and I said, I'd like to come into your program. And he said, okay. I didn't even know about my ADHD at the time. He came in later when I was in the coaching program. I was diagnosed in the middle of that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, by the way, because it's important to the story, what prompted you to even get diagnosed? At what age? And
It was Ben's book was the first thing, and Driven to Distraction was the first thing. When I read that, I saw myself in there completely.
what I'm asking is what made you pick up the book? Like, what was,
I was walking by a bookstore. And I
okay.
saw in the window in New York City, Truth. I just,
Okay.
it was Zoom. It was like just sitting there, Driven to Distraction. And I knew my whole life there was something different about me, something weird. How could I do all these things so well and all these other things? How could I catch a baseball going 90 miles an hour and I couldn't pay attention to my math class? What's wrong with me?
Okay. So it was wow.
And so I saw this book and I saw the title and I went in, and it was the first time probably in years I closed that bookstore up that night. I got hyper focused and I read the whole darn thing because I was so, and that just proved the interest piece, which I didn't know about. So all these pieces came together. First, I read the book, then I went did the research, and I found out more. And what I realized, there was such ignorance about this disorder. There were very few people that knew how to diagnose or treat, and that's why I had a hard time getting diagnosed. So I went to the head of the psychiatry department at Albany Medical College and there were only two options for medications at the time, Ritalin and Adderall. Hold on, Dexedrine, free. That's it. And Ritalin didn't work. So the third one was Adderall, and it worked. And it worked very well. In fact, I'm not ashamed to say I've been taking it for how many years now? 35, 40 years. My blood pressure is 120/80. I do things extremely well when I know I'm my ADHD manifest. And I don't feel like an addicting. If I was so addicting, how come I forget to take it all the time? That's another story.
Right.
But there's new research coming out on ADHD. And I'm not here to promote medications because medications are different for everyone. For some people, they work. For me, they worked extremely well, especially in areas of boredom. So, but what I will tell you is knowing your ADHD is critical and essential for moving forward with it, because it does not mean you're broken. There's strengths. There's tremendous strengths.
To your point, I have to share. So I have struggled, as a lot of us with ADHD do, with anxiety. And, and I remember I'm not going to take anything. I am not going, and I'm a cancer diagnosis.
Me too.
Been through a divorce. And I remember my mother saying to me, if you had diabetes, you wouldn't think twice of taking insulin. So why would you not take something that, would help your brain? Like, we have to start, really destigmatizing all mental health issues and any reason that we would take. And I also want to point out, because I am now, really coming to an audience who are discovering ADHD, and a lot of them are not going to be able to take medication because they are
40%.
Right. So I'm even more an advocate for ADHD coaching and them discovering that life can improve. So I wanted to hear about your ADHD story. So you saw a book, and then you enrolled in a coaching class before you knew you had ADHD. By the way, I started a home organizing and move management business before I knew I had ADHD, specializing in seniors, and then discovered it. And then when did the ADHD coaching, ADDCA or ADD Coach Academy, right?
Yeah. So to your point, I'm going to make a response to it. Pill doesn't give you the skill. The pill only puts you on a level playing field.
Yeah.
So I knew that it put me on a level playing field. But in learning how to play on a level playing field, I had to understand how my brain worked. I had to understand, where do my strengths show up? How does this thing called ADHD impact me? And so coaching came out of a need to educate myself. And once I educated myself, I realized, if people understood this, wow, I could take this coaching model, this life coaching model, and begin to integrate it into the dynamics of ADHD. Because coaching a person that doesn't have ADHD is different than a person who does have it. And so I started to create educational models. One of them is called the IMON. In fact, I'm writing a white paper about it right now, because it's based in neuroscience and it's based in practical application. And so I went through this process, and the more I went through it, the more success I had. And I built my coaching practice by first trying things on me. And then out of the woodwork, I started attracting people because I started writing articles about rumination and hyperfocus. And people started reading them. And before I knew it, my practice was filling up very quickly. And after 3 years of coaching, and so I took the life coaching piece and developed the ADHD lens piece because there was nothing out there. There were people saying they were doing it, but nobody was doing it like me. So I explored with it and experimented for a good 2 to 3 years with my clients to see what worked. And what I realized is these models worked really well for educating. They picked it up quickly. I took metaphors and visuals and words that were familiar and put them into models that people could say, oh, your ADHD is like this. You need interest for your fuel tank. Interest is the fuel to your car's engine. And your car's engine, if you don't put the right fuel in it, it's not going to start. But once it gets started, you need the spark plug to keep it going. That's the ignition. What's the ignition? Positive emotion, not negative emotion. So the models developed a structure and framework for myself. I was able to take that structure and framework and begin to help a person understand where does your ADHD show up? But not only in terms of pathology and impairments, where does it show up in strength and success? And to your point, people bury their success, their buried treasure deep within the subconscious because we have a pervasive negativity bias. We always go for the negativity over the positivity, and it buries it. And so when I realized I sort of had a bent towards looking at the things I did well, that's what had got me through it. Because my grandparents had been like that. They'd always look for the things in me that I did well. They were Holocaust survivors, and they were appreciative of everything in life, and they passed that on to me and didn't let me get down. I mean, I have to be realistic, but they always looked for the good in me. They didn't always do it with themselves, but they did with me because I was their grandson. And my parents, too, were more so my grandparents had that hood, and my mom always looked for the good in me. My dad was working, and he had ADHD, and he hyper-focused on the business, and he made a great living, but he did not balance it out. And wasn't until his 80s, when I wrote my book, that he started to understand his ADHD, and our relationship grew very close. So all these things worked, and what it taught me is the pill only puts you on a level playing field if it works. You have to understand how your ADHD shows up, where it manifests, how it manifests. And that's where I decided at that time, I was coaching out of full practice, and people were coming to me, well, why don't you start training coaches? There's such a need. I realized, and I said, I need that like a hole in the head. No desire to do it at the time. But then I realized how pervasive it was around me. So I joined ADDA, which is the adult ADHD, the world's largest ADHD adult organization, wonderful organization. I eventually became president of it, but ADDA gave me the opportunity to present the concepts called coaching and conferences and webinars, and people started to hear me speak, and my speaking engagements got bigger. And I started off my coaching practice. By the way, Marla, if not for Marla, I wouldn't have a coaching practice. My wife, I
Okay.
wouldn't have training. She got very involved with me. She saw that there was an opportunity. She saw that I couldn't do this by myself because my strengths were in the coaching. My strengths were in the presenting. My strengths were not in the counting and keeping track of all that stuff, which she did really well. And then during my training, I met a wonderful woman, Barbara Luther, who eventually became our director of training years later. Now, we had gone through a very difficult time in the ADHD coaching world because it was new. It was like a frontier. Everybody called themselves an ADHD coach. There were no standards. There was nothing. And so people were going out there and doing some damage. I was developing standards. So first, I got accredited by ICF, but they didn't know anything about ADHD. So I got accredited by them, but I brought the ADHD competencies into it and then started exploring with it and standardizing it. And Barbara, during that time, said, if you'll do this for 3 years successfully, because there had been such lack of integrity with other programs, she said, if you do this for 3 years in integrity, or it was 2 years, I will call you in 2 years and I will come work for you if you want me. And sure enough, 2 years later, she came in, and what she was instrumental in, I had tons and tons of information written all over the place. I had 15 models and I had the whole process outlined. She helped me consolidate it and put it in a language that was just beautiful. We worked together very hard on that for 2, 3 years. And then we put all these competencies together and all those things. And so she was my editor, and she gave me the ability to verbally process all these thoughts. But then she said something powerful. She says, I still don't understand it conceptually, but I want to understand it in my bones. So Barbara came to work for me, and she literally was with me for 2 years, every day, watching how I coached, what I did. And another 2 years, then she said, I get it. I get it. She knows this stuff really, really well. And that's what she decided I'm going to become your director of training, because I understand it conceptually, but I need to understand it in my body and my bones, and everybody did with it. And I respected that. Now, at that time, my coaching practices, but the academy started to pick up. It started off with 8 students and 15 and 20. And before you knew it, we had 3 instructors. Now we have 15, or we need another 5 at least, because there's a waiting list. And it grew because the need for what we do is so great. And what I realized is 2 things. You have to develop a partnership of trust with people with ADHD. You have to be able to sit down and listen without judgment, compassionately, and no matter what they tell you, you have to say, I totally get where you're coming from.
Mhm.
I may not do it the same way that you do, but you have a unique brain wiring that you need to embrace. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just the rest of the world screw up. The rest of the world doesn't understand it.
I want to share a quote. That's such a good segue. And then I also want to talk about being a student with you if I can. And then I want to
Sure.
go back to little David, because I think that's one of the things that people like to hear is, well, how did it show up? How is it?
Oh, yeah.
But let me give you this quote that just ties back to the world. So it's by Neil deGrasse, who is, I guess, an astrophysicist with ADHD. And maybe
Yeah.
you've heard it, but
I don't think so.
okay.
I know who he is.
Okay, so it's ADHD is not a disorder. It is a phenotype, a different kind of wiring. People with ADHD carry the OG genetics, traits that made them the elite hunters, gatherers, and scouts in ancestral times. Fast reflexes, heightened sensitivity, scanning attention, and quick adaptability were all superpowers in natural environments. It only gets labeled a disorder when you're born into a modern world that forces you to sit still for 8 hours a day, memorize irrelevant information, and conform to systems designed for industrial efficiency, not human brilliance. ADHD isn't the problem. The environment is.
You bet. He just mimicked exactly what I did. And let me tell you something. He is so right. And by the way, there's research that's coming out that says it's the environment that causes it. When I say environment, it's the perception of the environment. If you go into a school system and the environment is perceived as pressure, it's going to shut your brain down immediately because you're under pressure. And then add to this, it's a phenotype. Think about this. The human brain has 100 billion neurons. Well, actually like 65, 75 billion. A lot. Each of those neurons, not morons, I'm calling them neurons, are chemical factories that make all the neurotransmitters that allow your brain to function. There's 75 billion of those. And then each one of them is connected to bridges, synaptic connections, 10 to 15,000. So think about that. In every human brain, there are trillions of ways that we process information, trillions. And the tool says, shut up and listen. Don't ask too many questions. Follow the way I do it. And if you follow the rules that we have, you'll be fine. But if you don't follow the rules, there's something wrong with you.
Well, I want to.
It's crazy.
Right. I want to throw one more at you. And I think, why is it that we're seeing more of it? Well, when we grew up, you had recess. We had time in between. We had nature. We had an opportunity to get outside. And these kids have so much on their plates. So, I mean, I don't know what you think. Back to your point with they're saying it's the environment. I would say that there is some increase in ADHD for people maybe who didn't come by it naturally from the constant screens and they don't know how to be bored. But I think, like you mentioned, your father had it. My mom and dad both had it. We came to it naturally. We had ADHD well before we had iPhones and iPads, right?
Well, there, you said it right there. Technology. Social media. We're inundated with messages constantly. Life is too fast. The ADHD brain is already too fast. If you don't put brakes on it to slow it down, it goes faster and faster and gets in more and more trouble. So that's the first thing. It's the technology. It's the expectations of performance has to be fed. Listen, when I was a kid, I think the fax machine was in there. Before that, things took forever to get there. It wasn't so terrible. But the moment the fax machine came up, people started getting anxious. Oh my God. And then the internet and all this stuff. It makes it so fast. We're in a speed trap. It's a huge, huge speed trap that we're in. People don't know how to slow down. And there's a belief system that the faster you do something, the smarter you are. It's just not true. And in fact, look at Albert Einstein. It took 10 years for the theory of relativity. I can go through all the great inventors and writers and leaders. They were not fast. Mahatma Gandhi was slow. When Martin Luther King, these people took time to process information and do it right. And yet we live in a world, get it done yesterday. So it's speed, it's a speed trap. It starts to manifest in perfectionism. People are afraid for failure. It's a whole spiral. It's a whole negative spiral, and it's gotten worse. I was glad I grew up at the time I did.
Sure.
Even though I had ADHD, my teachers didn't make me feel bad. They said they had a different way about it. And all my teachers knew I was a good athlete. So they put sports came easy. And look, how does ADHD help people who are older? I'm just going to be 70. And
Okay, I'm going to pause because we need to take a break. And I think that is a great question to answer when we come back. So we're going to answer the question is, how does ADHD show up when you're 70? And is it a good thing or a bad thing? I want to find out a little bit about future or about younger David. And I want to share one of the best things that I've learned so far in your coaching program. So stay with us. And if you are enjoying the podcast, like it, subscribe to it, and share it with your friends. So, all right, with that, we're going to take a pause and a sip of water. Ever wondered why helping a loved one declutter feels like speaking different languages? I did, especially with my mom. It wasn't until I founded Silver Linings Transitions, helping San Diego seniors organize and move for over a decade, that I discovered why. We all experience clutter differently, and for those of us with ADHD, it's a whole other world. If you are listening in the San Diego area and feeling stuck with moving, paperwork, photos, or home organization, our team at Silver Linings Transitions gets it. We understand ADHD's unique challenges, and we won't just help you get organized. We'll create sustainable systems that finally stick. Schedule a consultation with our team today at 760-522-1624. That's 760-522-1624, or find us at silverliningstransitions.com. And we are back with David Giwerc. We left you with a cliffhanger, and that I'm 70 years old, and
not yet. I'm 79. That'll be 70 in February. So
I will not push it. So you're an Aquarius as well?
Yes, February 4th.
Oh, January 29th. Okay, something else we have in common. Okay, so I hope you can remember where you were going because I interrupted you, and I know we don't do that very well when we have ADHD, is get disrupted and transition. But take us back to where we were when I so rudely interrupted you, David.
Yeah. So one of the things that people don't quite get about ADHD is that we can hyper-focus when we're really passionate about something, especially when we're inspired by something we truly love. And what I've seen with a lot of people with ADHD, they don't give themselves permission to do the things that they love. They start feeling guilty about it. I should be doing all these things. And one thing that I gave myself permission to do at a very young age is at least one thing every day that I love to do. And the one thing that I love to do for most of my life was sports. And I played high school and college basketball. And at age 64, I went up for a shot 3 weeks before my daughter's wedding, and I ripped my Achilles, just ripped it. And my wife, 2 weeks before the wedding, I had one of these hop-along braces on. It was hop-along with Captain Hook at the wedding, and I still danced. Didn't stop me. I was still dancing. But the point of it is, this had been a passion of mine since I was 12 years old. For 52 years, I'd done something, and now there was this huge void. What do you do when there's that void? Well, I knew I loved sports. I knew I loved athletics. So a friend of mine took me over to our local tennis club, and I started playing tennis, and I loved it from day one. I loved it so much, I don't do anything, excuse my expression, half-assed. When I go into something I love, I go full force, just like I do with the academy, just like I do with coaching, just like I do with dogs, because I love dogs, just like I do with my grandchildren. There's no in between. And sometimes I have to balance that because I have to be careful that I'm not putting everything into something at the expense of something else. So that was the biggest thing I had to learn. But what I'm telling people who are my age or older, give yourself permission to find a passion because it doesn't matter what age. Now, let me give you an example. I was 65, which is considered a senior citizen. Many people retire at that age. I'm not ready to retire. I want to do things. I took up tennis at that time, and I just didn't take it up. I played competitively. I started playing at one level, and I rose up the levels from a 2-0 to a 3-5. And then I started entering tournaments. And I entered one tournament for 55 and over. And I joined the USTA, United States Tennis Association, played in leagues and was competitive. But they didn't have any 55 and over leagues. I either had to play an 18 plus or 40 plus, which is really a lot younger. And I was competing and I was doing well. So I get an email about a 55 and over tournament in Long Island. And they'd say qualifying tournament. Whoever wins that tournament gets to go to nationals. And there were people from all different regions of Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont. I was the only one from upstate New York. I went down and we played 5 or 6 matches. I was undefeated in the 6th match, and I played another guy who was undefeated. And I was playing, and I was really hyper-focused. I did not hear anything around me. And I was down 5-2 in the tiebreaker. And at that point, I said, screw it. I got nothing to lose. Go for it. I ended up winning 7-5 and became the qualifier for the national tournament. Now, there's more to it. So I got an invitation to the national tournament in San Diego, which I went to this year, April 4th or 6th. I've told nobody this. You are the first to get this, other than my good friend Barbara and my family. No one else knows this because I don't like bragging about it, but I'm sharing this with you because I want you to know that you can do anything you want to. So I went to this national tournament where everybody was 55 and over. There were only 3 guys that were older than everybody else, either top 50 players in the country. I ended up winning more matches than I lost, and I was ranked 42nd in the country. When I left, I just got my new ranking. I'm now 26.
Wow.
So what does this tell you? Age doesn't matter. It's heart, it's focus, and what I know about the ADHD brain is what Marivalco said. ADHD is a deficit of interest and engagement, but there are higher levels of interest. There's how important is it to you? How inspiring is it to you? And when you're inspired, you can use the imagination. And the example I just gave you, I was inspired by something that naturally came to me. Now, let me say, I went and took lessons, and I worked at it, and I practiced. It wasn't just, but I loved it. I loved it. And it was my one thing I can do every day. And there were days I didn't love it, especially when I lose, because I'm a lousy loser. But I learned a lot. And so what I learned from this is this fits exactly into the models. It's a model for what I teach. When you are inspired by something that is truly important to you, and you give yourself permission to express it through your character, and for me, love and kindness and social intelligence, but my processing modalities, I need to move. Movement is critical. If I'm not doing something that I need to move it, movement and creativity. Creativity is one of my character strengths. Love and kindness is one of my character strengths. Even when I play tennis, I'm kind. And so I went to the national tournament and I left. And this is what I came back with. I said, you're asking me the question, how does it show up in older people? It shows up and it's on down. When I get retired, I'll even be able to do more of it. There won't be a void. So give yourself permission to do this.
So, okay, a couple of things that you touched on. It's interesting. I am 55, and I will tell you that if I am not doing something productive, I feel guilty. I feel like my brain is just, it's like a race car. It's just constantly going. So, I think all of us with ADHD need to give ourselves permission to not be productive, but it is very hard to just sit and do natural.
Except for
Right.
How do we define productive? If
Right.
productive means going out and doing something that's good for my brain and my body, that's really productive. But we don't think that way. We think of, I got to get this job done. I got to make money. I got to pay the bills. But guess what? If you're not doing the stuff that makes you feel good, that other stuff doesn't come about.
Well, and that's right. And I want to go back to, because I mentioned to you that there was one of my favorite things that I learned in your coaching program, and that was character strengths. And I think that for anybody who is listening, it would be really helpful if you will define what that is, and so that they have a better understanding of how that applies to your tennis story.
Okay. So character strengths are a strength inventory, a survey that you've done. It's been around since the late 90s by Martin Seligman, who was head of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. He and a guy by the name of Peterson at the University of Michigan, unfortunately passed away, developed this very psychometric, reliable, and valid inventory that measures how you perceive yourself. But it's not only how you perceive yourself, there are 24 universal character strengths that have been researched all over the world, even in tribes, Africa and Australia, that these universal attributes show up in all human beings. But the first 5 to 7 are the ones that make you come alive. The other ones show up, but they show up situationally. Isn't that interesting? Because that's what ADHD does. It shows up situationally. So these character strengths, you just answer. There's 120 questions. Don't overthink them. Just answer them naturally. As most like me or least likely. If you're not sure, put it in the middle. And it will give you back, for everybody that I talked to, they say it's a very accurate survey of the most important ingredients that make you tick. So mine are kindness, love, social intelligence, creativity, and leadership. Those are my 5. Okay.
And look at what you're doing.
And then I look at what I'm doing. And by the way, here's what's so beautiful, Jamie, I'm glad you're bringing it up. When you don't express at least 2 of those character strengths on a daily basis, the bad side of your ADHD is going to show up every single time. Now, no one used this with ADHD. We were the first. We actually did a poster study of what are the character strengths of individuals with ADHD. Now, it didn't show us what the strengths were, but it certainly showed us it was starting to trend towards creativity and humor. Okay. But where it really showed up was self-regulation was always low. Perseverance was always low. Now, here's what's interesting. The moment you use at least 2 of your signature strengths, the ones that make you come alive, self-regulation automatically goes from 24 to the top. Why? Because you have to you have to pause, which is self-regulation. You have to pause, you have to pay attention, you have to access those character traits out of your body. And the only way you can do that is by creating positive emotion. And so every single time, I'd love to get enough money to do a research study, because what we're finding anecdotally is every person with ADHD, when they express at least 2 of their character strengths on a daily basis, the good side of their ADHD shows up every time.
That's great. Okay. So I have a couple other questions that I want to make sure that I get to. One is, can you give me an example of an ADHD situation that just happened to you that might be relatable to people who are listening? I have them all the time.
Well, on a daily basis, what I have to do is catch myself as procrastinating. And because I get stuck in these old stories. So if I have a list of things to do, if I go to the thing that is most boring, most mundane on my list, like I got to do the bills and I got to do whatever it is, doesn't mean I have to start there. It means I need to get momentum in the brain. And so what I've known for 30 years is you don't start your day with ADHD in your most boring, unenergetic, mundane task. You start it with the thing that gets your brain going. It's momentum. So I look at the thing that I want to do most. And I get that out of the way, but I limit it because I could spend the whole day doing the things I want to do. And I limit it for 30 minutes. And before you know it, my brain's gone. It makes it easier to do these other things. Now, if something's really boring, I use assistive technology. I don't use the word processor because it's too slow to me. I use voice activated software. I dictate my emails. I put them in a email. I put them in my file to be looked at later. I edit them at the end of the day. I don't do it all at once. I just get big things done in chunks. And I learn my system. My system is the moment I see my momentum stopping, it means I need to pause and activate it. And so I know the things that activate it start from areas of strength. And I use those areas of strength to bring them into my areas of weakness, like voice technology, like movement. During the day, my legs get tired. I get up and I walk around. And I can feel my legs and my brain are in sync. Moment my legs are tired, so is my brain. I get up and walk around. I listen to music. 5 minutes and then I come back. So these are daily hacks or things that I use because I don't do it the way everybody else does. I don't start with my most boring tasks. I start with the one that activates me the most. I know how my brain works, so I use those things. And I always take some sort of physical break during the day to walk, to do something physical, because if I don't, it affects me. Okay. Now, before I knew about my ADHD, I did just the exact opposite. I did what I thought I should be doing, and I procrastinated and got very little done.
Sure.
Okay. So those are the kinds of things I do.
Okay, well, it wasn't so funny, but it was definitely helpful. So, can you share a little bit about little David before you knew you had ADHD growing up so that those of us who are discovering our ADHD later in life can, I think when you go back and you look at how you acted, you can totally see it, hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. Speaking of hiding, I did a lot of there too. Nobody could find me, but very hyperactive,
Mm-hmm.
very assertive,
Mm-hmm.
very physically active. In fact, I was nonstop and it was hard to be around. My mom and dad had a very tough time. I mean, if I didn't like something, I took it away from kids. I broke up things. I had to be the center of attention. I really disrupted a lot of people around me. But the thing that they liked about me, I always had a smile on my face. I was good natured, but I made it bad for everybody else. So they couldn't get too angry at me, but they got angry enough. Teachers had a really hard time with me reeling me in, because once I got going, I was in the principal's office. I asked a ton of questions. I asked so many questions that the teacher had to send me to the principal's office. What she didn't realize is curiosity was one of my strengths that I was being punished for, but they never gave me any rules. Maybe only asked 5 questions instead of every 2 seconds. So they didn't know how to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one thing that saved my life was sports. So at age 9, they got me involved in basketball and baseball. Baseball was too slow for me. If they put me, I had to be a catcher or pitcher, forget it. So I was a catcher. I played baseball, but then I got into basketball for many, many years. And that's what calmed me down. Because back then they didn't know ADHD was. I
Sure.
was just a hyperactive kid that got in trouble.
Right.
And then sports mellowed me out. So mine showed up very much in very physical activity and expression with no impulse control.
Mhm.
Zero.
Mhm.
Zero. And the sports mellowed that impulse control down. And as I got older, I realized if I don't work out, it's going to be trouble for every year. And to this day, I need to.
Yeah,
Not
I
as
love
much as when I was younger, but still.
You're definitely the poster child for having a good understanding of working with your ADHD and what you need to do to make it your superpower. And I know that that's a word that a lot of us don't like to discuss, but I want to bring this to an end. And I want to talk to the audience who are listening to this podcast. And I have had people say to me, why does it matter? Why does it matter that a 65-year-old discovers that they have ADHD? And my answer to that, and you and I kind of talked about it when we met for you to help me with my presentation, was the word gerotranscendence, which is Erik Erikson's 9th stage of life when he was in his 80s and he started to talk to his peers and evaluate his life and make peace with the decisions and who he was and just kind of wrapping up his life. And so I believe that why I am enrolled in your coaching program, I believe that offering coaching to seniors who are discovering themselves and looking at their life. Like, I don't believe that you're ever too old to learn about yourself. And one of the traits of ADHD is curiosity, to your point. So what would you say to our listeners who are considering coaching and what they should look for and how they can find you?
Well, so life is about stories. Life is about constantly telling ourselves stories, and and we have a book, and each chapter of the book changes as we age. And as we age, we can create new chapters in the book. And the new chapter in the book is I just discovered my ADHD and my life has been reinvented. I have a new life. I have a life that I didn't realize when I was younger, not something to grieve upon. It's just those past years now give you the pleasure of understanding the difference between understanding it and not understanding and how much better your life can be. And the coach is instrumental in inviting you to enter your own new story of possibility and reinvent it by saying, well, look at what you do so well. What would happen if you did more of it than less of it? What would happen if you gave yourself permission to proceed doing these new things that you know you're really good at, but you didn't know until now? What would happen? What could you do? How would your energy feel? This is what a coach will do brilliantly with you, and they won't let you forget it. They will tell you this new story that you're bearing constantly. But you're going to remember to pay attention to it, because if you don't, I will. We become advocates for executive function. Person that sees you with an objective lens because you can't see yourself because you have a hard time distancing yourself emotionally from it. And as you begin to distance yourself with a person that knows how to do that, that's trained in it, we begin to stand for it. Look at how great you are at this. You're telling me your language is all about the dark side, but I see this beautiful side of light that you buried, and I see it every day. How can we invite you to bring more of that into your life every day? How can we do that? What's the first thing we can do? And the moment they begin to give themselves permission to do that, everything changes. Their ADHD no longer becomes a deficit. It becomes an attribute that needs to be expressed uniquely. And that's the new story. And it doesn't matter if you're 90 or 9, whatever you find it, every day should be an expression of what makes you come alive, no matter what age you are. And that's what coaching does. It invites you collaboratively with somebody that understands it initially better than the person who has it, but is inviting them to see not only the definition conceptually, but how it shows up in their life practically. How does it show up so that they can see it every day and say, when this shows up, I got to pause and pay attention to it and not let the dark side get in the way of the light side. And you should embrace it.
So if somebody wanted to become an ADHD coach, then I would encourage you to, and I did look into different programs, and the people that I respected the most in this space had gone through your program, and that's ADDCA, ADDCA.com, ADDCA.com. And how would someone find, because I don't think they go to ADDCA to find a coach.
They do.
Okay. I'm not there yet.
In fact, when you become a certified coach, we have a directive. It's only for the people that get their certification going through. And it's broken down by niche. I think there might even be one for seniors, if I'm not mistaken.
Or there should be.
And if there's not, guess who's going to start it?
Me or you?
No,
or Barbara?
You.
Okay.
Because when you get certified, then we're going to have an opening for a new opportunity. It's not been there before. No one's asked for it. And that's how we do things. So we're going to do that. And it breaks it down by need. So there's for executives, for adults, we go to the adult category. And there are coaches that will coach older people. It's not their niche, like it's going to be yours, specializing. But you can go and find specific traits that you want for a coach, look them up, and it will take you to all those coaches that specialize in that niche.
That's great. Well, you just gave me an incentive to finish my 50 hours sooner than I had planned on. And I also just want to mention, we're going to have a link to doing the VIA character strength so that they can get an idea of who they are. I know a lot of coaches, when they start working with someone, will give that assessment to people. And I think it's so helpful to know what your strengths are. David, is there anything that I did not ask you or that I should have? You're the principal and I'm the student. So there's that intimidation factor.
No, this was a wonderful, wonderful area. It's just so thorough. So I think the thing is that people listening to this, I want you to know, this is how coaching is. It's authentic. And this is how people with ADHD are unbiased. They're the most authentic people in the world.
We don't like small talk.
No, and they appreciate everything because they've had it so tough. But it doesn't have to be tough. That toughness that you went through is a reminder of how you need to change it to this new way. And always look, I went through the tough, but that's what taught me how to be where I am now. So in other words, you can't know what a strength is unless you feel the weakness, and you can't know what success is like until you've had challenges, quote unquote. I don't even like to call them failures, but you've got lots of that stuff inside of you. Allow yourself to go and explore and discover it and embrace, express more of it every day.
I want to wrap up with one more thing that I like to share with my audience. And that is, rather than feeling shame of our ADHD, we should feel proud and resilient because we have cobbled it together. And I love to use the quote, and I'm going to butcher it a little bit. They said that Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did, only she did it backwards and in heels. And that's sort of what I feel about ADHD. We had to figure it out. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for being a guest. Thank you for all that you've created for me and for the world that I am stepping into and that our listeners are stepping into. And aging does not mean that you don't get to discover yourself and improve your life. And that is what this podcast is about. So again, join our Facebook community, Grandma Has ADHD. Look into the coaching program, become a coach. You know, there's no reason you can't work if you're retired, it's definitely fulfilling. And thank you so much. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.